Welcome to the Touching into Presence podcast.
This podcast is for people who are interested in bodywork, empowerment, and somatic-based practices.
I am Nikki Olson.
I'm Andrew Rosenstock.
We are certified Rolfers.
Collectively, we're trained in various movement and bodywork therapies with an emphasis on somatic awareness and client resilience.
Through conversations, our goal is to share and explore mind-body paradigms to offer empowerment possibilities.
Today's conversation is with Jim Pascucci, Equine Rolfer extraordinaire, certified Advanced Rolfer, CrossFitter, and so much more. Besides being an incredibly intelligent and ingenious person, Jim is also extremely funny, as you'll soon hear. Our talk today covers many areas of Jim's expertises. You'll learn about his path from engineering to horse and dog whisperer, and just maybe you'll laugh nearly as much as we seem to. The three of us are easy to get into long conversations, and we decided to hold off on the CrossFit conversation for another time, as we were already past our planned designated time. So stay tuned for that. And with all that, here's Jim Pascucci.
I'm happy to have the three of us here together. It's nice. It's good to be surrounded by great people.
I'm interested in the equine rolfing just from a couple of reasons. A, I have a great deal of respect for horses. They also terrify me. I definitely believe there's that vibe that they feel on. I've been horseback riding a few times, and I'm not comfortable, and I know I'm not. I'm sure the horse is feeling it too. So I'm curious about that, just because also from having a small role in teaching, a couple of times having students come through specifically to Rolf horses. So I just that transition of learning on humans and then taking that, and I believe there's obviously another course that they take specific for horses, right?
They don't have to. I didn't. Dr. Rolf didn't. I mean, that's the kind of the fallacy, right? I mean, who's the thought leader? I guess my question.
Well, so what is it that got you into equine rolfing?
I think that the better question for me is what got me into human rolfing, because so what Nikki was just saying of people coming in who wanted to specifically work with horses, I came to the Institute to become to learn what rolfing was from I've already been rolfed by people, but my objective was to work with horses, because I was already a horse person. So it wasn't like I went to the Rolf Institute and then decided, oh, this is a good thing, let me try and apply this with horses. I was specifically going to work with horses. And what got me into the Rolf Institute was, you guys probably, I don't know how long, you don't need to tell me, but are you familiar with Liz Gagini?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, yeah. So Liz Gagini was my Rolfer at the time, when I went into the Institute, and she was pushing me to become a Rolfer and to work with horses. I was an engineering manager at the time, and we just moved up to Boulder from Colorado Springs, where I'd worked for Hewlett-Packard. And I left Hewlett-Packard so I was a manager at Hewlett-Packard. Susan was a manager at Hewlett-Packard. And I left HP on a buyout to go into vet school, to become a veterinarian. And the problem was that the type of buyout that they offered to us, we had to sign up for it before I knew I was accepted into vet school. And as it turns out, there's a lot of reasons I didn't get into vet school, but one of them was a typo. And so I didn't get the residency points, and vet school has a weird way when you're applying, vet schools, you have to get so many points to be able to get accepted. And so I didn't get the residency points, but I didn't know that I wasn't going to be accepted into vet school. And I'd already had told HP that I was going to be leaving. And so I took the buyout, which they made very attractive. Susan took the buyout. And when I took the buyout, they asked me if I'd stay for 6 more months, which was great because I was waiting to get into vet school. And then I found out that I didn't get accepted into vet school and I didn't have a job. And so, being who we are, the best thing for us to do was actually move up into up north into the mountains for a while. So I spent 3 months riding horses. And one day I was reading a newspaper, the Denver Post, and I saw a job posting and for a company that was starting up in Boulder. So I called and applied for the company and got the job, blah, blah. And so then I came to Boulder, and I had I guess it was 1993. I was involved in an endurance race in Fort Collins. There was a race around Horsetooth Reservoir in that area. And that's what we call an elevator ride. So it was a 25-mile loop. And then at the end of the 25 miles, you could decide that you wanted to go another 25. So it was a 25 and a 50-mile race. And while I was there, I had a really bad horse wreck. And so the only thing I remember is the last thing I remember was that there was a horse galloping up behind us. We were on a road going into a ranger station. It had been raining the night before. There was a big puddle, and I was legging my horse over to go around the puddle. And I decided that I was going to drink water because we were going to a water stop for the horses, and I wanted to have everything. I didn't want to be taking care of me at that time. I wanted to have my attention on the horse. And I heard a horse galloping up behind us, and I bumped the horse. So I just, with the reins, I just said to the horse, don't race, just stay where you are. And this horse had a 14-mile-an-hour trot, and so we were trotting, blah blah blah. The next thing I know, I'm talking to a doctor in the hospital, and he says to me, do you know where you are? And I said, yeah, I'm in Fort Collins. And he said, do you know why you're here? And I said, yeah, I'm racing my horse. And he's like, okay, do you know what happened? And I said, I won. Why am I in the hospital? And he was like, okay, you're going to be staying the night with us. So I had a closed head brain injury, completely separated my acromioclavicular joint, and broke 2 ribs on this side. So apparently I was knocked out when I came off the horse. And the way I think it happened is I was drinking out of my water bottle. When I heard the other horse coming, I checked my horse, and he kicked at that horse. And when he kicked, it snapped my head back and it knocked me out. And so I'm pretty sure, because I landed on my arm against my rib cage, and, that's a very rare injury. You have to actually train to fall and do that. Like football players have to train that way. Most of us are going to put our arm out, right, and try and break the fall. And so I didn't have that. So I landed like this, separated my AC joint and broke the ribs, and it was really pretty wackadoodle. I had, really bad short-term memory loss. Blah, blah, blah. Continuing along, Liz Gagini is trying to get me to go into the Rolf Institute. And when I got to work on Monday, my boss, I said, I just had this bad horse wreck. And he's like, you're key to the operations. You've got to come to work. And it was so bad. And people say they've broken ribs. If you've never broken a rib, you don't know how painful it is. I mean, you can barely breathe. And I was walking down the hallway with Susan because I had a doctor's appointment, and I sneezed and I passed out in the hallway. I mean, so you're driving along if you're alone and you've got broken ribs and you feel like something's going to happen like that, and you freak out because sneezing and you pass out while you're driving, right? I mean, so anyway, so then I became pretty determined to not stay in that position, and I determined that becoming a veterinarian was just not a good idea when the starting salaries for vets back then were $20,000 a year, and I was like, I can't live on that. And so Liz Gagini kept pushing me, and there was an annual meeting up in Allen's Park, out by Estes Park. And she said, why don't you come to the annual meeting of the Rolfers, because there's going to be a demonstration of people working with horses. And so I went, watched Jan Sultan and Tessie Brungart work with this one horse. And Tessie was living in Boulder at the time, and Jim Schulke was the director of the Rolf Institute, and she was living with Jim. And I said, I'd like to have Tessie come over and work with my horse. And so she worked with him. He got hurt as well. And so she was working with him, and I'd never seen the horse act the way he did while she was working with him. And it was one of those family things, so Tessie and her kids were there. Jim and his kids were there. Us and our child were there. And Jim Schulke, who was the director of the Institute, looks at me and says, "You're hooked. You're going to become a Rolfer." And I was, yeah, you're right. I am. And so that started me on that path. So that was in 1994 I was certified.
So when you first started your practice, did you just work with horses and then eventually worked on people?
So while I was in the Institute, obviously, we were all Rolfers, so we know what the training is like. In the time that I went, we did auditing and practicing. We didn't do unit 1, 2, 3. But you obviously didn't work with horses during your Rolf training. And so you have to become more familiar with, obviously you're going to work with people. And I'm pretty shy. People don't get that about me. But being in a room with somebody, it just wasn't, friends of mine going, "Are you really sure you want to do this?" Because I'm kind of a loner. But it turned out that I liked working with people. So my practice while I was in training, it took, 16 weeks. So it was 8 weeks auditing, 8 weeks of practicing, but it was, split up over time. In my notes, you'd see, apply this to a horse, apply this to a horse, apply this to a horse. And I would go out and work with horses. So I developed my system of working with horses while I was in training. And then I would test it because I'm an engineer. And, people, when you say to somebody, what do you work with the horse, you Rolf the horse. And, what does that mean? They say, well, I do a 10 series. And I just from an engineering view, you go, really? What do you, that's fine if you don't know what if you're not a Rolfer and then, talking to somebody, but if you're an engineer, you go, how do you do the second session? There's only 4 toes, right? And they're in this hoof, right? So how do you work with the feet? So right off the bat, you say, well, you probably don't, right? So let's throw that out. Okay, now we're down to 9, right? And then, what about breathing? Horses are pretty good at breathing. The first session, we're going to open up the superficial fascia. That's 3 sessions, right? It's not. So I started, making changes to what other people said they were doing. And then I would go out and test it. So I should round them up. They're probably on VHS. I'd have to get them on DVD. But this is the time when our son's like 2 and 3 years old. He was 3 years old. So he's like like Rome, and Lion King. There's videos of him singing Lion King while I'm running. Susan's videoing it, and I'm talking about what I'm looking for. And it was a lot of fun because I knew a lot of horse people. And then to actually try and build the horse practice, I would invite Tessie to come out because she was living in Boulder and work with my horse and do demos. And then I'd see how things went. But most of when I started the practice, it was a mixture of horses and humans. So then I started in Greeley. My human practice was Greeley and Boulder, so I had 2 practices. Took me, 1997, I went into advanced training with Tom Myers. Tom was the anatomy instructor at the time, and that was a really good class. I mean, there was me. Not that I made it good, but it was Jim Asher was one of the instructors. Ron Thompson was the assistant. I don't know if you guys know Ron, but he's a brilliant guy. Tom Myers was the anatomy instructor. I think can't remember who was the movement person, the functional part. But Ron Murray was in the class. John Martine was in the class. Libby Eason was in the class. I mean, all people that we know, have a lot of respect for now. Anyway, so I was in the class, and I was the youngest Rolfer in the class. Jim Asher had actually specifically invited me to come take the class. And so I'd been Rolfing for 3 years, but I was the oldest person. So chronologically, I was old. And we were doing that first day, circle thing of introducing yourself, and people were like, I'm Ron Murray. I've been Rolfing since rocks were young, and blah blah blah. I'm John Martine, and I'm an anatomy instructor at the Institute. I've been Rolfing for 7 years, or whatever. And I'm thinking, didn't you guys have to sign a contract that you're supposed to do this training? And so I'm embarrassed because I've been, 3 years. And I said, well, I'm Jim Pascucci, and I Rolf horses. And Tom did not like that. And so he
Interesting. Why?
There are a lot of people, and they're still out there, who believed that, and I don't disagree with them, that Dr. Rolf wanted to work with bipeds. And so if you're going to use the term Rolfing, right, and in an application to horses or to anything other than a human biped, you're on kind of thin ice. And I totally agree with that. So if you put the verb Rolfing in front of, or the title, how did you figure out how to work with a quadruped? You didn't get it through Dr. Rolf. And so I own that. And I call my work animal structural integration. Of course, we're all Rolfers, and that's what we're saying here. But anyway,
I am curious at some point later on to go more with that, because I'm thinking about the line of gravity in a quadruped is very different than a biped. I think we'll get there in a bit.
Yeah, very different, like 4 times different.
Well, when you were talking about the second hour, I was thinking the front and the back are still the feet versus the arms, and I don't know enough about the movement science behind horses galloping, trotting, or running. Or I don't know. I'm not a horse guy, clearly. I have ridden before, and I enjoyed it. But
you've been on a horse before.
Been on a horse a few times, and camels, and other, yeah. But yeah, I'm sort of curious, thinking about that, which I hadn't really thought about until you started speaking about how to, bring the 10 series into it.
Which is interesting. Sorry, I was thinking that you could apply it easily to a horse or animal. I mean, I think with the horses, because there's horses, I mean, maybe dogs too, but like there's that certain species that there is that connection that you have. But when you were talking about it, especially from an engineer point of view, applying the principles, like, I mean, if you apply the Rolf principles, then I think you could easily transfer that to an animal. Creating support, creating adaptability.
Of course, you can do that for an automobile as well. Mm-hmm. Right? I mean, that's a tree.
I mean,
they're not living.
But think of like fifth hour. The function of a psoas in a horse is very different than the function of a psoas in a human being.
Most definitely. And so I guess the point is that there were people who were taking a 10 series and applying it to animals, and there were people who were talking about Rolfing eagles and dolphins, and there was an angst within a number of people who were saying, why are you denigrating what we do? And then, not that Tom was saying that to me, but there was it was a little bit, for me, it was, like I say, I'm shy. It's the first class. That's why I remember it. Right? And, I was thinking, wow, I'm the only guy here. I've only been working, 3 years, and all these other people have been out forever. And I don't know what I'm doing. And this is the first class of the advanced training, and people were very curious. The classmates were very curious about working with animals, and I did a demo with somebody's dog, and I'm not I am pretty metaphysical in my life, but I don't apply it to working with animals the same way. And so people would come up with these principles that didn't make it. They weren't engineering. They weren't physics. They weren't, engineering for me, and it was a little bit difficult. But then one night I said to Tom, I said, you want to go out for a beer? Because it was getting a little bit, it was only 5 days or 4 days that we were actually interacting. And we went for a beer, and he said to me, tell me about what you do. How does one, I remember him saying, so how does one Rolf a quadruped? And I just told him the 5 series that I had developed. And he was, very Tom. And he finished his beer, and he was done. We had, I was done, and that was it. We went our separate ways, and we had one more day of class. It was Friday. And I thought, I just got to avoid all this quadruped stuff for, one more day, and I'm golden. And as soon as I walked in, did you guys ever go to the old institute? Do you remember
in the end of Canyon?
Right.
That's where I did my
Canyon and Pearl. Huh?
Yeah. That's where I was.
All right. So remember, so where the kitchen was and the bathrooms, right? And everybody would congregate when they were going in the big room. And I walked in the room, and I don't remember who it was. Maybe it was Ron Murray, who was asking me a question about, because he had sled dogs, I think, at the time. And he was asking me some question, and I was thinking, God, don't let Tom come in. Let me just get through this thing without talking about animals. And here comes Tom, and he says, I've had it up to here with people talking about Rolfing quadrupeds. He goes, and I don't think that they know what they're doing. And he goes, until now. He goes, you have figured it out, and you need to let the rest of us know about it. And so that's, it was really generous of him, and you need to write a book and teach. And so that was 97. And I decided, okay, I'm going to do that. I'm going to teach. And so I developed a course and started offering it through the Rolf Institute. And it was only open to advanced Rolfers, but And then 10 years after that, I wrote a book about it, and I refined so the things that I told Tom that time, in 1997 were not the things that I would tell him today. My 5 series is different than it was then. But so taking 10 down to 5, and then taking 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 5, and putting them around in different orders to see which is the best thing. How do you get the horse to actually work best? How does that structure work? How does the quadruped structure work? And it took a while, and because I'm an engineer by training, I'm a rolfer by training too, I guess. I ran a lot of experiments and kept a lot of notes, and I'm shocked now because I'm shredding years and years of paper, and I'll open up a piece of a bar napkin, and I go, oh wow, this is where I figured this out.
So what are the results that you see when you structurally integrate a horse? I mean, it's not like the horse is going to come up and be like, oh, I feel this pain.
Right. Yeah, so that's the first thing you need to understand about working with animals, is that you don't work with, they're not going to call you. I've yet to have a horse or a dog call me on and make an appointment. So you're working with a human, and it's a little more, it's like working with a parent and a child. And so I don't work a lot with children in my rolfing practice, but you know what I'm saying when I say that. Right? So you don't have, the customer is not the horse, the recipient's the horse. The customer is the person who called you. And it's really important to be able to ascertain their understanding of what do they want for their horse, and how are they going to judge whether or not you've done it. And then on the other side is, how are you not going to take advantage of them, is what I would say, being a Brooklyn kid. So you have somebody who's really loves their animal, and they want something for them, but they may not be able to see what they can get, is that, or what they got. And so to mitigate that, I started off with my first session has a money back guarantee for animals, not for humans. Because I can, we all do this, right? Human stands up and you say, how do you feel? And they tell you how they feel. So what is the primary therapist in rolfing is gravity, right? I mean, you have people who, you know this, I don't have to preach to the choir here. You're working with somebody on the first session, and you think you're done, and they've been receiving the work, receiving, but they don't really have an idea of what happened. And then they get up off the table, and if they don't fall over, he's going to do some back work on your bench. They get up off the table, and you have them walk around, and you see their structure start to change, and they get those aha moments, because now the therapist is actually showing up, and that's gravity. So we take them out of gravity to work with them, and then put them back into gravity, and the therapist shows up, and they say, I feel different, and I start to adapt. I mean, you can nod if you have that experience.
Of course. So that brings me, just again out of curiosity, when you're working on the horse, you
need a table that can hold that weight.
So you do lay down the horse.
No, I'm kidding, Nikki.
I wasn't sure.
I was thinking you had some sort of table that would lift it up, like you would somehow lift the horse.
No, when you started with that question, I was like, boy, am I going to really?
Hey,
no. So there you are.
People, they'll do anything. So I wouldn't be surprised if there's a specialized.
No, the horse is the one. The horse is the one that you need to. So you hit on it, right? I mean, with the dog, you can, or a cat. I don't work with cats that much, but with the dog, you can lie them down and work with them. But with the horse, they're standing up through the entire thing, and so the anthropomorphisms that we use in how we describe receiving work and what we feel like doesn't work with the horse. It's not 100% inaccurate, but it's so inaccurate that you might as well just throw it away. And so people will say the horse feels good. It's closing its eyes. It's doing these things. And I don't look for that. I look for structural changes. And then when do you see those changes? So how do you create that aha moment of the equivalence of the human stepping off the table into gravity, right, with the horse, which has been in gravity the entire time, is to actually get them to move. And so there's where the issue is with the owner or the human, the guardian that's brought you in to do the work. Can they actually see the change in the horse? Right? And a lot of times what they're going to do is, if they're taking riding lessons, they've got a riding instructor, who's saying, get some work done with this horse, blah, blah, blah. And they're going to wait to see if that person sees it. Right. So that's why I give a week for people. I've never been asked for the money back. And I mean, it could be that people are doesn't mean that everybody's satisfied, because there are times when people don't call for a second session.
One of the things, like for me, one of the reasons I don't always love working with children is because the parent wants it, the child doesn't necessarily want it. But like you were saying with the horse, you can't really have that conversation. But have you had times when you've worked with horses where it's felt like this work won't land because the horse isn't in the mood or doesn't want it? Or
No, I get, so I have the same child parent thing with you, and I have a requirement that parents, and a guardian has to be in the room if they're under 18. And it's really distracting. I don't think that horses have, or animals have that kind of attitude about things. They don't know what it is that you're providing. For all they know, you're going to provide them with a bucket of grain. I mean, that's not. So it's not like they're not wanting to do something, being rebellious against the other person. They will. It's really different. It's really different when you're working with a human. Unless you cue them to move, right? Like do a tracking or something. Put it where it belongs and call for a movement. The old Dr. Rolfer instruction. They don't. I mean, and if they do, I don't know. Have you ever gone to a massage and said, "Yeah, baby, give me that"? But I'm just saying that, you see that with a horse, and then so the owner might say, "Oh, they don't like what you're doing." I have I don't know if this is going to be public now, but so I generally try and separate myself and the horse from the person who called me as quickly as I can, unless I know them and they're really good horse people. So I'll have them on the outside of a stall where they can talk to me if they want, but the horse and I are on the inside. Especially if it's a stall, I don't want a lot of people, number of people in there, because the horse could react negatively. Or in a round pen, it's rare that I'll have them hold the lead line. I mean, like never. Then people, it's not. You have to go into a different space. And talking is something I do with my human clients, but I don't talk to horses in that, in the same way I do with a human.
So
sometimes I do in the morning just to joke around. Excuse me?
So what is the language of speaking with a horse? Like
the horses are. Go ahead.
Well, just from with talking to horse people and just my personal experience is that there is this belief that horses have this kind of higher sense of animal being, that there is something very intuitive about them, that they're really smart, they pick up on animal or human energy. And is that true?
Let me see. I get to choose whether or not it's true. I think that you've thrown it out a couple of times here, but the term anthropomorphism, right? It's the putting human characteristics onto an animal, and then there's the term zoopomorphism, which most people don't do. And so on the opposite side of the coin are horses, right? Animals who think you know what they're talking about. And so where we have to be is somewhere in between. We don't want to be anthropomorphic. I don't think that horses have emotions like we do, but I do think they have emotions. I know this for a fact. We call it, being buddied up. If I take my two horses, which Nikki, you've seen them. So if I take Dawn out and put her in a pasture where my other horse Ziggy can't see her, and I think I'm going to take Ziggy out after that, it's a disaster because he's freaking out. Where's Dawn? And she has a habit of just running off. So now he can't see her, and he thinks that he's been left. And so he's not an easy animal to manage when that happens. So I'll take them both out, and I have to work through obstacles and things. And so they do have attachments. They do care about each other, not in the same way that we care about each other. And I'll just leave it there. I don't know what the way is that they care about each other, but I don't think it's the same way that we care about each other. Ziggy's a gelding, and Dawn is a mare and intact, and so she goes into heat, and it's hilarious to watch her, cuddling up to him when she's in heat, saying, "Hey, big guy, it's time to have some fun." And he's like, female women haters club, he's like Spanky and that. So what do horses do? Horses are prey animals. They can see, they have a 270 degree visual acuity, so they can see up until about that 90 degrees behind them, which is where, unfortunately, is where a rider sits. Right? They don't articulate a lot. I mean, my Ziggy, when he sees me, so I can see from my house, from my bedroom window down to where my barn is and what's happening in my in that south pasture. And so I'll get up at 6 o'clock in the morning. I might look out the window from my bed, just look out and see that nobody's out in the pasture. And by 6:30, 6:45, Dawn has come out of the barn and is standing there waiting to see, just waiting. And then I'll get up, and I know the fact that she'll look up at me. And I go, how can she see me? But she knows that I'm there. So how did that happen? We can, I'll never know if she saw me. Right? But it happens enough that I think, so I just fantasize that that's what happens. If I come down to the barn and I'm stressed out, they're going to pick that up, and they're going to pick it up as prey animals. They're not going to pick it up into some other empathy. They're going to pick it up in, how do I survive? And so the way a herd survives is that they communicate threat through their body language. So when we're stressed out, we have a body language of stress. And when a horse says, I'm going to show you some respect as a herd mate, and assume that you know what you're talking about, right, from your body language. Is this making sense? Oh, yeah. I'm going to look for the threat. So then what does a horse do to find a threat? Well, you've got this long neck, and all of your sensory apparatus is on your neck, right, at the head. So you're going to get your ears up and your eyes up, and you can see, take a look around. And so while you're stressed and they're going, I don't see anything that's stressing you out, their movement of their head like that might have stressed you out. Then they might get to the point where they go, I'm freaking out because I can't, as I trust you, I can't tell what you're looking, I can't see what you're worried about. So I'm going to assume that you're accurate. And what I'm going to do is prepare to be attacked from where I can't see things. Well, in evolution, the animals that pinned their ears back protected the atlanto-occipital joint, right? And if you're a lion or a tiger or a bear or a cowboy, the place that you're going to land on a horse is not in front, but it's in the back, right? And so they pin their ears as a protection mechanism because it's a reflex. It's not aggressive. But then we throw our anthropomorphism into it and say that horse is being aggressive. Be careful, it's pinned its ears. I mean, I have rabbits out here to pin their ears all the time when they see me. They're not threatening me. So how does a horse communicate? They communicate through body language. And they're pretty unforgiving with each other because it's all about survival. And so you may see a horse kick another horse, and it's more of a, like, there's the story of Naropa, Naropa University. Naropa's teacher, his guru was Talopa, and Naropa wasn't getting it, and Talopa took off his sandal, which in India is not and slaps Naropa across the face to wake him up, and which was from a teacher to a student, right? Wake up, you're missing the point, is a good thing, right? But but if you're an Indian culture, you just took something off your feet and smacked this guy across the face with it. It's a huge insult. And so that's what horses are looking at, surviving. And so we think that the herd, the alpha, if you will, of the herd is going to be the bully. And it's not true. It's the one who actually in most of the horse herds, it's a female who's the leader of the herd. And then there's a stallion who has the most awareness, but also has the most discriminating awareness. And so they can tell the difference between a plastic bag, if you will, going across the pasture and a mountain lion coming to take a fall. Does that make sense? So it's a different world. So horse body language is very important, and for us to keep our body language neutral is also very important. And breathing is one of the big things to do that. That contributes to that. It's just staying present.
So then it does give truth to then if there's a rider like myself who got pressured into going to a horseback riding.
So if there's somebody on your back, right,
that's not comfortable, my breathing's short, anxious, the horse might pick that up. Yeah.
Oh yeah, especially if it's not if it's not your horse, most definitely. So you're not going to gain their respect. And if it is your horse and you're still like that, then you need to find another hobby or go take lessons.
I've decided I'm not getting peer pressured into horse riding anymore.
No, I mean, so people ask me, they'll say like the best thing you can do for a horse is to Rolf the rider. And I say the best thing you can do for the horse is to have the rider take riding lessons. I mean, to learn to actually be a horse person. And that's the most satisfying people to work with for me, are the people that, I know when they get on, no offense, but you go out and you see some guy who's 500 pounds, or I don't know, let's say 400 pounds, and they're going to get on a horse that's, 800 or 1,000 pounds, and they can't balance themselves, or 40% body fat or something. The best thing for the animal is not to Rolf the owner, but is the rider is to have them start taking CrossFit, getting into shape, and then learning how to ride. And so it's really important that's if you're going to ride a horse, to learn how to ride a horse, to be an equestrian. And if you're going to be a horse person, then that's a different story. So like I haven't been on a horse in, I know for a fact, in 2 years because I can't. But longer than that. But when you're working with professional horse people, equestrians or trainers, what have you, it's really a lot of fun.
Do you know, are there any, and forgive my not knowing the correct terms, whatever the horse races are, the Kentucky Derby, I think is like one.
Yeah.
Do any of the big name horses get rolfing done on them, or?
I doubt it. I mean, I the last class I taught was in Lexington, Kentucky. And there, those people, Lexington is horse country, and and it's thoroughbred, mostly thoroughbreds. The racing industry is about money, and breeding and ranching. They call them farms there. We call them ranches here. Is about money. It's not about. They love the sport. But there are a lot of horses who go through there and don't ever make it, right? And they're the ones. I mean, they might be getting ridden by the guys who lead the horses on the track. It's just like saying the NBA, right? It's people make it into the NBA or the NFL. If they can make the owners money, if they can make the team, if the team are going to help the team win, right? So. If you can show that you're going to help the horse. Mm-hmm. I did a class in the first time I went to Vienna. It was all. I did 2 classes. I did an equine class and a canine class back to back. It was for the International Association of Veterinary Acupuncturists and Chiropractors, and we were on a racetrack. And the people on the track. These were a bunch of veterinarians who worked with the track horses, and they were trotters, so they carried. They had a sulky behind them. You know what I'm talking about? They had a rider. It was they had a rider in a wagon. It wasn't riding on top of the horse, and it got pretty contentious because the owners of the horses wanted me to work with their horses. And luckily, instead of the veterinarians who were my students, who I wanted to work so I could watch them work. And Susan was the one who picked up on it. She's going, "Have you noticed that they've started calling you Herr Professor?" I'm like, "What?" So the vet would come over and say something, and they go, No, Herr Professor, Herr Professor. And so they saw the changes in their animals, but it could happen. If somebody wanted to invest in that, if somebody wanted to take the time and learned, but you better know what you're doing. And you need to know horses, because these guys are not, if you're saying I'm going to help your horse win. I had a guy train with me once, and he had trotters. And I said something like, "Well, the stride length, yada, yada, yada." We were talking on the phone, and he goes, "I don't care about that. All I care about is the nose." And I'm thinking to myself, damn, we don't do nose work. Is it the nose? He goes, "Yeah, all my horses lose by a nose. So if you can make their noses longer." Anyway.
So you don't do the nose work on the horses?
We do, not like we do. I don't do that with humans anymore either. But we do work on making sure it's soft, just the nostrils. But there's no going up into the nose. I've seen too many, I don't think I've had my fingers in someone's nose other than my own.
But why did you, just out of curiosity, why did you stop? I know it's somewhat controversial a little bit not controversial, but some people do it and some don't. Why did you stop with humans going in the nose?
Primarily because I didn't think the cost benefit was there. The cost not being that, you're paying me money, the cost being that I might screw something up. And so I don't have a disrespect for people who do that. But you won't come into my my practice and see a bunch of finger cots and KY jelly. I did find some in my garage the other day. But anyway, that's it's more about me. It's not that I don't think it's efficacious. Somebody did a cadaver nose work once. I think it was Jeff Lynn, and it wasn't pretty. So, but that's a cadaver. So, yeah. But with an equine, I don't think you need to work with it. You can, I can work with the ethmoid and the sphenoid outside.
Yeah. I'm not as familiar with the anatomy of a horse.
Well, that was humans.
Yeah.
It's not different.
So Jim, you have an interesting journey with structural integration, Rolfing, with first being attracted to really do it with horses versus people, but then you opened your heart to people and then went to another beast of the CrossFitters.
Right. Yeah. CrossFit is CrossFit saved my life. So I'm a very, very big fan of CrossFit. I'll talk about CrossFit another time, but we didn't talk about canines because there's a difference.
So, Jim, tell me about canines in Rolfing.
Well, this may be an interesting story. I could share if it's useful to link into when we were talking about animals having their sense of danger. I can share a little bit of a story that I worked with our dog trainer around my dog, who, as you heard, he acts like he's gonna jump out the window and attack anybody who's coming to our door. He's part Roddy and lab. So Jim, I think when you're talking about the horse picking up cues of danger, I can relate that to an experience I had with my dog, who is a rescued dog that was abandoned and was left to die with parvo. We rescued him, and he's part lab Roddy, and great dog. Definitely has a sense to protect like a Rottweiler, but definitely has the goofiness of a lab. But anytime anybody comes to our door, he literally attacks the door and the window as if he wants to kill the person who's coming to our house. And so with two young kids at home, I wanted to try to curb this behavior a little bit, just to be able to receive a package without having to keep my dog back. And so I had asked our dog trainer to come and work with me about this, but I was conflicted because I also really like the sense that he's very protective. And so I was like, I don't want to train him out of it. And we opened up to a really interesting conversation because she was talking about, well, this is kind of who he is. He's hardwired that way. And if you're stressed, so clearly you're not going to put off stressful signals when the FedEx guy is coming. But if you actually feel like you're endangered, Bacon, the dog's name's Bacon, he's going to pick up on that. He's going to want to protect you no matter what. So even so much, he could be super well trained, but if he's picking up on the hormones of the stress puts out, everything in his nature is going to want to drive to protect you, and it's going to you can't really train that out of him. Do you have any feelings around that, considering
I think that relate it back to a horse, and then come back to the dog. When I was in high school, I worked as a dog handler for a professional hunting guide, and the dogs we used for hunting were Plott hounds. It's a German breed, and we hunted bear and boar, wild boar. But so dogs are a predator, and pretty much almost a pure predator. But they're also I don't want to say they're a human creation. So a Rottweiler and a Labrador they're not they're our creation. And that's an interesting mix. I like Rotties and Poodles better as a protector. But you get that Rottweiler, that Poodle bark and that Rottweiler body, and it really scares the hell out of the mailman. But I'm kidding. So you've got a prey animal versus a horse, which is a prey animal, which is the horse, and a predator, which is the dog. And where they are on the scale, I don't think there's any pure. It's a little bit hard for a horse. If you fly a kite into my pasture, there are horses that are going to run away from that. My horses are going to destroy your kite. If it lands in the pasture, they're going to go over and they're going to have a talk with it. So they have a little bit of predation in them, if you will. And then there's the protection of the herd versus the protection of the pack. And obviously, dogs are a pack animal, and you're the pack, and and your boys and Rob. So they're protecting you. And I'm not going to say that I'm not a dog trainer, so I would, my advice is not around that. So they're protecting you, and if you're thinking that when we can raise our voice or we can, say to them, stop doing that in a negative way, they're not going to. We need to come at it from the dog trainer view of saying, what would another dog do? How does the dog train this dog? Does that make sense? Like if you get kicked by a horse, you probably were signaling them something, and they were saying to you, or they were signaling back to you, you better stop doing that. And pretty soon they go, wake up, and they kick you. And so, that's what dogs are going to do. I mean, Rottweilers are, Labradors are supposed to retrieve tennis balls. And Rottweilers are supposed to make the bad guys feel like they shouldn't be around you. And so that's an interesting combination. You would hope it would blend out, but maybe you got more Rottie than you did Labrador.
I don't know what the story is on if they were purposely bred together. It doesn't sound like it. I mean, he was banded in an apartment complex. But I'm
just saying that's an interest. I mean, that's what you've got, right?
Yeah.
And that's we all can relate to that because none of us are purebreds. So the Rottweiler, you might have more Rottweiler protection than you do Labrador play. Like my last dog, who's in my canine videos and stuff, is Jake, and he was pure Labrador. I mean, he's like, he would, when he was a puppy, I'd look for him in the pasture and he'd be laying in the ditch, just, laying there in the water. You go, what are you doing, man? You should be afraid of water. But Jake was, everybody's my buddy. And the coyotes would come at night, and the coyotes learned to bark. And come on, Jake. Instead of howling, they'd be ruff, 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 ruff in the pasture. And Jake would try and go out and play with them. And, where your Rottie would be like, yeah, I'll go out there and kick some butt. It's a different Labrador. So I don't know if I answered your question.
So you mentioned the video. Is the dog video, is it a Rolfing dog or a structural integration dog video?
Right. Yeah, I can't remember what I called it. I think I was very sensitive to calling my work Rolfing. And so I think the dog one, actually it's on, there's a couple of them on YouTube. It's called canine myofascial massage or something like that. But yeah,
well, I'll look for that and link it into the description of this podcast.
Yeah, if you want, I can find them and send them to you if you want.
Yeah, be interesting. Yeah. So what led you down into getting the dogs?
Actually, it was so I've been a dog person longer than I was a horse person, I guess, and but I never had any intention of becoming a dog Rolfer, if you will, versus wanting to work with horses. But a friend of ours had a Great Dane that became a wobbler. Are you familiar with that syndrome? So the quadrupeds have like two major plexi, and I haven't looked to see if humans have it, but they have one up in the thoracic, so it's kind of an amplifier for the nervous system, and then one in the lumbars. And so when big breed dogs and horses as well, when they grow too quickly, the nervous system isn't able to keep up with that. And so this, I have a picture that I got from my friend in Lexington, Kentucky. It's on the Rolf group on Facebook that I just threw up there to see if people wanted to comment on it. But anyway, so what happens is the nervous system that can't communicate, the brain doesn't communicate well enough with the rear end, if you will, and then the animal looks like it's not able to coordinate itself. And so when you get this in big breeds, and you get this in growth spurts in humans as well. And so this dog would walk around the corner and bump into like going into from one room to another through a doorway, and bump into the wall and fall over because it couldn't coordinate. It was like it was drunk. So they call that wobbling. Drunk. The veterinary procedure for it is very expensive and not that efficacious. And so these were people who were longtime friends of ours, especially my wife Susan's, and they asked me if I could come over and work with the dog. And up until that was the first dog I had worked with.
A great dog to transition from horses to dogs is a Great Dane.
Yeah, Great Dane. Yeah, you don't have to go that far down. What was funny though is that at the time I had this habit of eating. That Chinese restaurant that's over by Dugabi.
Yeah, China Gourmet.
Yeah, Chinese. That was one of my favorites. And so I went there and had like sesame wings or something, and with a friend of mine, and I'm watching. We're talking, and I said, "Oh crap! I'm supposed to go see this dog." And the dog was over somewhere in North Boulder, like right up the street, and I didn't wash my hands, so I go in to see the dog, and the first thing the dog does is like try and take a piece of chicken out of my hand. And the owner's, well, maybe he doesn't like you. Maybe he's afraid. So, anyway, so I was able to help the dog. And once I was able to help that dog, I said, well, why don't I start looking at canine anatomy and canine biomechanics and see what we can do. So the 5 sessions I have for equines is different than the 5 sessions for canines. They're not completely. It's just like it's 3 here and 4 here and 5. It's just there's 5 of them, but they're 1 and 2 are pretty much the same. But what are you trying to do? And the difference with between horses and dogs from a practice standpoint is that the canines people are very attached to. They're more of your family than like a cat. My cat's like my dog, whereas the horses live in the barn. Even though we're here with them, a lot of people pay money for their horses to be someplace else. Like they wish they could do with their kids, I guess, maybe their husbands.
And some do.
Right. But so you want to to me, there's a thing about being having a personal integrity of not you can make a lot of money taking money from people who love animals. They're and not provide them with anything. So when they say to me, well, what do you? I say, what do you think? And they go, well, what do you see? And I go, I'm paid to see good stuff. My boss would fire me if I told you it was not. I didn't see a change. But so with dogs are also predators, and so the time you can work with them is about 30 minutes, and that's from the time that they've got they're under the control of the guardian, and to the time that you're letting them go. And with horses, it's about an hour. And they have prey animals have a better ability to concentrate. and to, stay aware. Whereas a predator, unless there's something that's going to eat them, they're pretty much out there to eat other things. So the higher you are on the food chain, if you will, the less aware you have to be of your surroundings. So, cats and dogs sleep a lot. Right? Horses sleep like 4 hours a day.
I'm just thinking of for both horses and dogs, right? Part of the integration piece is the sacrum and neck work at the end. And do you bring that in
session? Of a Rolfer, of a human session.
Of a human session, right? A human session. You generally end with a pelvic lift, a neck work, and or back work, depending on the session. Do you bring that into the quadruped work, or?
Yeah. So the neck, every session, the neck, and every session, I'm kind of an old style Rolfer, I guess, in that the long stroke down the back, elbow, with the horse, not with the dog. So you're going to go from the withers or from the shoulder, just caudal to the shoulders, down to the rear, and then there is a session. Excuse me.
I was going to say, I bet they love that.
I think that's anthropomorphic. I get paid either way. Yeah, I think there's differentiations, as we know, right? So being able to read which direction does that tissue need to go just by how the tissue is presenting. Like, are you going to take tissue away from the spine and towards the spine? Are you gathering or spreading? Things like that. But generally that's the head and neck, and that last couple of strokes is just pretty quick. But the head and the neck, not the head so much. So I always start off in the atlas. There's a lot of nerve endings there, and allows you to actually make friends with the horse. Get an idea where the horse is going. I don't always do that with the canines. You can't say dog. Right? So if you're saying, horses, do you work with miniature horses and ponies? And, not really. I mean, there's breeds, and breeds have some characteristics, but they're not it's not like the canine world, from Chihuahuas to Great Danes and Rottweilers and Rottweiler Labradors. And, there's just, generally in the horse world, it's very rare for a mare or for a stallion to jump a fence and start breeding in the neighborhood. And you don't have litters. And I had 2 dogs. Of the last 3 dogs we had, one was a purebred lab, and the other 2 were litter mates, and you could not tell that they were from the same. They definitely weren't from the same father, and we know they were from the same mother just because that's the way things are. But they definitely had, Heinz 57. So more people were donating, or more dogs were donating. So, but yeah.
Well,
and then cats are like, just scratch their stomach. So then there's the thing, there's a bias on my part. Like with horses, it's a performance thing, and it's very rare. So if Nikki were to bring your dog the next time you come out, it'd be great to take some video of him. I mean, he can run around up here.
Oh my God. I don't know. What would the horses do? But Bacon was left alone.
They might put him in his place, let me tell you.
Yeah.
They're not going to be afraid of your dog. It'd be fun for me just to see, get some video of how he's walking and stuff. Mm-hmm. So I'm doing a Zoom class on evolution of movement. Every time I see my horse, I can't get my horses to walk for me. It's like, would you move so I get some video? And they're like, no. And so,
well, I know we're taking a lot of your precious time because you have a lot going on. Definitely have you on again to talk about CrossFit and rolfing. And
what I would share is that I get people who, who are rolfers, and they, especially dog owners, and they'll say, can you come see my dog, or blah, blah, blah. And when I tell them, why don't you just work with them? They say that they don't know how. And I would just encourage people to go out and learn on your own, right? I mean, there's a difference between, like people say to me, do you certify? I don't certify you in anything if you come train with me. And most of the training is kind of like this. It's a conversation, and let's see you can't cover all the possibilities of what you're going to see with an animal. And so you can just cover the general principles. So a lecture is general principles, and then we go work with the animals, and we work with whatever presents itself. And so I think that there are a lot of people who don't have the confidence. And when I've been doing this for 26 years now, and that's the only difference. I would say that that's the biggest difference between myself and someone else, is that I think I know what I'm doing. And that's just a little, and you may not think you know what you're doing, right? And so you just got to change that front end of the thing. Doing is the same. You just got to change that. Do you know or not? And be open to, to looking at what you're about. So I take, my process was to try and document what I was thinking I was going to do, what I thought the result was going to be, and write it down, take photographs, make videos. For a year, that's what I did. I had, my cost was, you wrote a check to a charity of your choice, handed it to me for my fee, and I had video rights to the work I did with your animal, video and photographs. And I remember I tell the stories to some people the other day about, there was a horse, Skippy, who, a veterinarian that I have a lot of respect for, who used to help me teach classes, and it was my vet, had suggested that the person should put Skippy down, should euthanize this horse. And the person didn't want to do that, so they called me out. And I said, I'll work with Skippy, but I don't know if I'm going to be able to help the horse. And so I don't feel like I should take your money, but what I will do is take the photo and video rights. And so blah, blah, blah. I worked with Skippy about 2 or 3 times. That's how I found, I forgot I had a YouTube channel. And I was looking for something. I was looking for a Skippy video, because I know there's one out there someplace. And so we did the Skippy. Long story short, Skippy went on to become a really high-end reining horse, which is not easy work. And the veterinarian wanted to take a picture of Skippy for something, and the owner said, "Oh, well, you're going to have to contact Jim, because he owns the video and photo rights to this horse." So just try and be conscientious. Like I know you two are, but there are so many people out there who just don't seem to have the confidence that they need. And I was lucky that I had Tom Myers willing to tell me you figured it out, and that meant so much to me, because I'm not that confident.
Thank you, Jim. It's been great. We always really enjoy talking with you. You're just a great guy.
Thanks, Andrew. I appreciate that. All righty. Thank you, guys.
All right,
I appreciate it.
Thanks, Jim. Be in touch.
Okay. Yeah. Enjoy yourselves.
Thanks for listening to us at Touching Into Presence. We hope you enjoyed today's conversation. You can find out more of Jim at jimtherolfer.com. Please feel free to leave us positive reviews on Apple Podcast or other podcast aggregators. And please share with people whom you feel these episodes may be of interest. Nikki and I do this for all of you out there, and we hope that we're making a difference in your worlds. We look forward to hearing back from you and seeing you on our next conversation at A Touching Into Presence. Bye-bye.